And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. I got to tell you, one of my favorite things about living in East Tennessee is the fact that we experience 4 seasons. In the wintertime, we will get snow. Now, it's not a lot of snow like up north, but we'll get maybe an inch or 2 most years. Some years we get 4, 5, 6 inches, but we get snow. And then the summer times, man, it's hot. You get to get on the lakes and go boating, and it's a great time here in East Tennessee with the lakes all around. In the fall time, you see the mountains are just picturesque. The colors of the leaves, wow, it's breathtaking, just God's handiwork there. And in the springtime, it's awful. It's awful because we live in a bowl. Literally, if you look from Knoxville, Tennessee, you look east and west, there's mountain ranges on both sides of us. And so the pollen in the springtime literally sits here in Knoxville, and it'll drive you crazy. My truck, I have a white Ford F-150, and this year it was yellow. It was a yellow Ford F-150. But no, springtime is beautiful. Just watching God's creation come to life after the wintertime is just amazing. You know, we all go through seasons, cycles of life. The Byrds sang a song back in the 1960s, to everything there is a season, turn, turn, turn. In the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, Solomon talks about a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, right? So we all have seasons or cycles. There's cycles in life. There's seasons in life. Have you ever stopped to consider where your business is in the business cycle? Where your business is, what season it's in at this point? Over the last few months, I've been analyzing the clients that we have the honor and privilege to serve. And as I'm analyzing the clients, I'm noticing a trend on when clients begin to seek help. So I want to talk you through my business cycle. The business cycle as I see it. And I've spoke about this through the past 36 months, last 4 years. I've spent some time talking about these various cycles, but I want to lay it out in a graphical format for you so that you can understand and identify where you're at and perhaps identify some of the stresses you're dealing with, and more importantly, how to move through the process or the seasons or the cycle of business. So let's go way back to when we first started our business, or maybe when we first purchased our business. Whenever it was, we're going to call that launch. You launch your business. You know, one of my things that I have, and for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, I've had this rocket ship. It's the Apollo series rocket that, like Apollo 13, the movie perhaps you've seen. It's the Apollo series rocket. It's actually the Saturn V rocket. I've had this on my shelf in my office or on my desk, wherever I've worked, for about 25 years. I don't know where I got it, but I can remember the specific reason why I've kept it, and that's this. This rocket took an enormous amount of energy just to clear the launch pad, an unbelievable amount of energy. I've written about this in times past. In fact, if you want to go back and read a blog that I wrote on the Financially Simple Experience called Do You Have an Entrepreneurial Personality? The second article, way back in 2018, I referenced this particular Saturn V rocket. Here's an interesting fact. This particular rocket carried 203 million gallons of kerosene and about 318 million gallons of liquid oxygen. And they would mix together to combust for liftoff and to move the rocket into orbit and then ultimately back to the United States, or back to the world, for that matter. During ignition or during liftoff, more than 80% of the fuel, more than 80% of 500 plus million gallons, think about that, 400 million gallons plus is just to get it off the ground, just to get the rocket off the ground, not even into orbit, just to get about 2 foot off the ground. That much fuel is burned. It's amazing when you start to think about and compare that to business. Maybe you can reminisce your first early days in business where you're sitting there saying, holy cow, are we ever going to gain any traction? Are we ever going to gain any traction? Before you know it, you've launched, and now you're moving. And now you've gone from the launch phase of your business to now you're in the growth phase of your business. And this is where, you're just having fun. You're having a blast. You're starting to make money for the first time. You're starting to see things as it is. Maybe you started a business baking pies like Michael Gerber talks about in his book, The E-Myth, where Sarah bakes pies. Maybe you're a financial advisor listening to this podcast. We have quite a few, hundreds actually, that listen to this podcast. Maybe you're a financial advisor. Maybe you're an attorney. There are tons of those who listen to the podcast. And you're having fun. You're doing what you truly love. It seems like the sky's the limit, and the revenues begin to increase and the profits begin to increase, and it's just fun. It's a blast. You're in growth at that point. You're growing your company. But then something happens. Not too long ago, my family and I were doing a whitewater rafting trip. There's lots of rivers because of the mountains here in East Tennessee, and we were on a whitewater rafting trip and going through the rapids, as you can experience and you can imagine in your mind's eye. And we came to this particular rapid that they called the washing machine. And if you didn't handle it just right, your boat, this raft that held 8 or 9 people, would get sucked underneath this water, and you were at the mercy of the tumultuous river there. The washing machine. Before you know it in business, you're growing and you're having fun, and you find yourself in the washing machine. You find yourself in turmoil, wondering which way's up, wondering why I ever got in the stupid boat to begin with. Why am I in business? This got to get it easier. I'm working 90 hours a week. This is crazy. Nothing makes sense to me. And you're at that point where you're saying, man, if I could only go back to when it was fun, when we were growing and it was enjoyable. And so perhaps you try that. Perhaps you say, we're going to limit our growth. We're going to limit what we're doing. So you start cutting customers. You begin, and I see this happen a lot of times in medical professions. We stop accepting insurances, or maybe you own a particular service company that you're doing tree service for. Maybe you stop saying, look, I'm not taking any jobs underneath a certain limit. And you start trying to limit your turmoil, your washing machine effect, this upside down, topsy-turvy type of a world that we quickly find ourselves in as business owners. And what happens for a short period of time, you begin to go back in that growth mode. You go back in that phase where you're enjoying business once again. But the only way that you move from growth is either into death, atrophy, or back into turmoil. So we got to get through this phase of turmoil. And as I'm analyzing the clients that we work with through Heritage Investors and Heritage Business Advisors and those who read Financially Simple, what I'm discovering is the vast majority of business owners are in turmoil. They've been there, done that. They've got the t-shirt. We had the battle scars. Heck, many times we had the bloody noses the very time they contact us. Just this morning, I was talking with a business owner, has just over 50 employees, that a PEO is not doing the job right, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And they've lost sleep over insurances being canceled because of mismanagement and payroll not being met. It's turmoil. So what's next? If we go through this launch phase and we go into growth phase and we're now having fun and we're driving down the river, and before we hit the wash machine on the whitewater rafting, and now we're in turmoil and we don't even know which way's up, and we're tired and we're exhausted and it's not fun anymore. It's why in the world to ever become a business owner to begin with? Friends, let me give you a little hope. If you find yourself there right now, you can get to the next phase, which is autopilot. You can get to the phase where your company is on autopilot. It can happen. What is autopilot? It's exactly what it sounds like. Whenever we would go offshore fishing as a teenager, one of the friends had a boat that had autopilot on it. And we would literally get in the back of the boat, lay on bean bags, because the back of the boat doesn't bounce as back as the front of the boat, by the way. We lay on bean bags, and the boat would take us to our fishing destination on autopilot. And we as teenagers, we would sleep. Somebody would obviously man the vessel just in case, there was another boat in our way. But autopilot basically controls itself. I'm driving a Ford F-150 that has this lane sensing device on it. And literally you can take your hands off the steering wheel for about a minute and a half, and it will go down the road, make the curves, keep the eye open for cars in front of you, et cetera, brake and all that jazz. It's an autopilot. We have self-driving cars. That's autopilot. your business can get to the point to where it runs itself. The golden goose, if you will. But yet so many of us don't see that. So many of us live in turmoil. So many of us are frustrated. So how do we move from turmoil to autopilot? It's the same thing we did whenever we were on the white water, in the canoe, or in this raft, I'm sorry. The guide said, if you come overboard, let go. Don't fight. Let go. Don't fight. So many times I see business owners trying to fight their way out of turmoil, try to fight their way out of the white water, like in my scenario with the Ocoee River. That's the worst thing you can do. The absolute best thing you can do is let go, build a plan, and get yourself to autopilot through the systems and the concepts that I've been teaching for 4 years here on the podcast. But here's where it gets interesting. You're in autopilot mode. The company is running itself, and now you're at peace. You're not stressed about the things which used to keep you up at night because you have systems and processes and team members, and the entire operation is clicking. If you're not careful, you'll soon enter into atrophy. The business will begin moving in a downward motion. Complacency kicks in. We start relying on systems and processes and forget to take risk yet again. Remember, risk is part of being a business owner, is taking risk, merited risk, measured risk. If you're not careful before long, we rest on our laurels. And the business that is not growing is one that is moving into atrophy. Now, what I would love to see happen is if we get into autopilot and the owners of the company or those managers of the company can now try to move into scalable growth. They can now start tactically moving the company to where they want to move it over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-year period of time. They can scale it properly. Remember, scaling is about being able to increase throughput, but it's also about the ability to decrease throughput like we saw in 2020. So that's part in the one area we go. We want to begin scalable growth. But what happens, though, is oftentimes we'll get on autopilot and we go on atrophy, and then we got to move into recovery. We start to notice, oh my goodness, I've gotten complacent. The business isn't moving us into that scalable growth model. I need to do something different. So what got us to autopilot is not going to get us to the next level where we're growing yet again. What got us here is not going to get us there. So it becomes uncomfortable. It becomes frustrating. And before long, if we're not careful, we enter the death spiral. If we're not comfortable enough, if we don't move into recovery or scalable growth, atrophy leads us into a death spiral. And I've watched it happen, friends. I've seen companies that were beacons of the community close their doors within a period of six to 9 months. I have seen it with my own eyes. And I can always point back to the fact that the owners of the business did not position themselves out of autopilot. They worked so hard to get through the turmoil, so hard to get through the washing machine effect like I'm using in my scenario, just to get back in the boat. And they got there, and the boat is now cruising, and it's doing its thing, and they can lay back and watch it work. And then the business moved into atrophy. Processes and systems began running the company, and we lost all risk and all personality and all vision, and it goes into a death spiral. So friends, let me ask you, where are you at this point in the business cycle, the business season? Are you in a season of launch? Have you just started your business? Man, there's no better time, in my opinion, to start a business than now. That's awesome. Maybe you're in growth mode right now and you're like, dude, we are having fun. We're growing. We're making things happen. Maybe, just maybe, you're in turmoil. You're just frustrated. Holy cow, Justin, I would never have dreamed business was going to be like this. Maybe you've been in turmoil and you keep going back and forth between growth and turmoil, and you're like, I've had it. We were actually talking with a client this last week, and they said, we have been in turmoil for 10 years. And I said, no, you haven't. You've been between turmoil and growth. You've never got your company to autopilot. You never got to that success level where you had the golden goose, but you can. We got to do things differently. Maybe you've reached that point to where it's like, dude, the company can operate without me. First of all, if you reach that point, let me know. Shoot me something on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and say, Goodbread, man, I'm in autopilot mode. I would love to hear that because I would give you a virtual fist bump right there, give you a fist bump and say, that's awesome. If you're already in autopilot mode, let me caution you. You've got to move into scalable growth mode. If you don't plan your next growth period, then the only thing aside from growth is atrophy. And if you go into atrophy, now you're going to be in recovery or the death spiral, one of the two. So where are you in the cycle at this point? You say, Justin, we need some help. Hey, reach out to us. That's what we do. There's lots of books in every one of these areas. But let's remember that what we're experiencing is a direct correlation to where we're at in the business cycle. So we'll have a picture of this on the blog, Financially Simple. I challenge you to go look at it. Look, friends, I realize life is hard. Moving from turmoil to autopilot in a business is hard. But we can do it. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple.